So, before we get started, I want to make something very clear. I am well aware that the Academy Awards is bullshit, and whether a film wins or not has far more to do with how skillfully it was campaigned than how good it actually is. I am first and foremost an art lover, so of course I feel somewhat gross about even caring whether a film I like wins something or not, because art is not a competition. It's not about that. But I can't help but be especially annoyed at the Academy this year for the sheer amount of great films they're just pretending don't even exist. I mean, I'm glad that Roma and The Favorite are nominated for a bunch of stuff because it's well deserved. Those films are outstanding. But there are so many other films that I was just blown away by this year that have been completely ignored. Again, I know that without a successful Oscar campaign, films just don't get recognized most of the time. But at least when I was younger, I felt like there would be films, especially in the foreign category, that I would have never heard of if I hadn't watched the Oscars. And that still might be the case for some people in the way that they look to the Academy for film recommendations. So I wanted to make this video not only to bitch, because God knows I can't help myself, but to highlight some great work that I feel deserves some recognition since the Academy Awards just don't seem to care anymore. Even though I will be saving my favorite film of the year for last, the other ones will be in no particular order as to how much I enjoyed them. So yeah, hopefully there will be at least one film that I mention here that will spark your interest, because God knows the Academy isn't going to tell you about them. Burning is a South Korean film by director Chang Dong-lee, and boy oh boy am I gonna watch his other films ASAP, because holy shit! This is one of the best movies I've ever seen. Not only am I shocked to see that this film is missing from the nominations for Best Foreign Film, but also everything else. This is one of those films that, if given the attention, could easily sweep an award show considering how expertly crafted every aspect of it is. The directing is flawless, the cinematography is captivating and immersive, and the acting is kind of unbelievable. You may have already heard about how good Steven Yeun is in this, but I want to clarify that it's not simply, oh, the guy from The Walking Dead is a lot better in this than I thought he would be. This performance is outstanding, period, and should have gotten him a Best Supporting Actor nomination. In fact, this is just one of those films where every performance in it is worthy of a nomination because of how authentic everyone is. And I really wish I could go into more detail as to why without spoiling the movie, but I can't, because this is one of those films that peels back information in such a way that it kind of prevents you from talking about its plot at all without spoiling the whole thing. This film is 2.5 hours long, feels 2.5 hours long, but trust me, that's a good thing. The character development on display here, especially on the main character's part, requires that amount of time to really get across what this film is trying to say. I know that sounds vague, but I really want people to experience the subtle twists and turns this film takes just by going in cold. Because trust me, it is beyond worth it, and if you want to watch this film with someone else, be prepared to talk about it nonstop for the next several days, because that's just how detailed every aspect of this film is. So, sorry again for not being able to talk about its plot, but I hope you can take my word for it and give Burning a watch. Hereditary is a horror film written and directed by Ari Aster. The reviews for this were kind of mixed when it came out, but I really loved it. And regardless of how you felt about its overall plot, I don't think there's any denying how amazing Toni Collette's performance in this is. There are several points in this film where she has to dial it up to an 11, and I believe every second of it. This role, if handled poorly, could have easily been a disaster. But Toni Collette, being the absolute pro that she is, just makes you go, oh, no, yeah, that's exactly how I would react in this situation. Is this real life, by the way? So yeah, needless to say, I'm just astounded by the fact that she didn't get a nomination for this. The production design goes above and beyond as well. I mean, the miniatures alone are enough to justify a Best Production Design nomination. The cinematography, editing, and sound design are pretty good too, but hey, it's a straight-up horror film. And even though the Oscars tricked me last year into thinking they finally cared about this genre, of course, it turns out that they don't. The amount of attention given to Get Out and The Shape of Water last year really had me believing that they were going to be more open to weird shit in the future. So when I saw Hereditary, I genuinely believed it had a chance at winning some stuff come Oscar season, but of course it's just a little too weird for them, but of course I love it. And I think it deserves to be given a chance, especially if you're a fan of horror. Mandie is a revenge horror thriller directed by Panos Cosmatos, and if you watched my review of it, you already know how much I love this movie. The cinematography in this film is mind-blowing, and its aesthetic is so uniquely beautiful you cannot take your eyes off it. I really hope that Cosmatos gets a Best Director nomination someday, because he's so talented and it really shows in how much this film is just completely his singular vision. Nicolas Cage's performance alone should have given him a Best Director nomination, because you don't direct Nicolas Cage. You harness Nicolas Cage like lightning, like Excalibur. You have to be worthy, and on a scale from 1 to worthy, Panos Cosmatos is King fucking Arthur. Like I already said in my review, Linus Roach does a great job in his supporting role as this narcissistic cult leader who's completely out of his mind, and it bums me out that the Academy is ignoring this unique performance. He even pulled out his pee-pee for all of you, and you looked away. Like cowards. Anyway, if you want to know more about how I feel about this film, watch my review, and better yet, just watch this movie because it's awesome. First Reformed was written and directed by Paul Schrader, and isn't a complete Oscar snub since it is nominated for Best Original Screenplay, but that kind of makes me even more baffled as to why Ethan Hawke isn't nominated for Best Actor. This film is clearly on their radar, so ignoring his acting here is just weird because it's really good. He's so incredibly convincing as this tormented priest who's desperately looking to find inner peace. Like, I believe that he is this guy. This character's health is also failing him, and Ethan Hawke does a great job of conveying that as well. There's a great deal of narration in this film that comes in the form of excerpts from the main character's diary, and Ethan Hawke's delivery of these diary entries is very genuine and very consistent with the character we're seeing on screen. This film is incredibly well written, and I'm so glad that it's being recognized for its screenplay, but since this film is very much a character study, the quality of the acting is just as important as the quality of the writing. Both have to be spot on if we're going to empathize with and understand this troubled man, and Ethan Hawke completely sells this to the point that you forget it's even him. It really feels like this character is a real person, which is absolutely essential to the story being told here, to the point where this movie would kind of fall apart if his acting wasn't as convincing as it is. This is a well-made film, and its story goes in a pretty surprising direction that I was not expecting, so if you haven't already, I highly recommend giving First Reformed a watch. You Were Never Really Here was written and directed by Lynn Ramsey and is not your typical film about a hitman. Ramsey is a very unique filmmaker who hasn't really, in my opinion, gotten the recognition that she deserves. This is one of those films where how much I liked it didn't really fully hit me until the day after I watched it. I could not get this film out of my head, much like her previous film, We Need to Talk About Kevin. She's a very visual filmmaker who likes to focus on tiny character details that other filmmakers don't even typically bother with. Joaquin Phoenix does a great job as usual, and like I said before, he is not playing your typical hitman. He is not the cinematic, suit-wearing cool guy that we typically see with this type of character. His inability to connect with people on an emotional level is portrayed as much more tragic and sad than anything else. The cinematography is beautiful, as is the usual with Ramsey's films, and I'm surprised that Thomas Townend hasn't received an Oscar nomination for his work on this. But I guess that's fine, because the Oscars clearly does not care about cinematography, since they were literally about to give out that award during the commercial breaks. That is, until everyone got pissed and they were like, oh, okay, never mind. So yeah, this played out in a matter of days, so in case you missed it, the Academy had announced that they were going to be giving out the awards for cinematography, editing, makeup and hairstyling, and live-action short during the commercial breaks. And of course, everyone was like, okay, this is the last straw. I am not watching this. And they were like, oh, okay, sorry, forget it, we'll just do it normal. The level of out-of-touch incompetence here is just amazing. An organization that sure does act like they love every aspect of filmmaking should not have had to have the public explain to them how disrespectful and insulting doing this would have been. Wow, you guys. Great job. Anyway, I highly recommend You Were Never Really Here if you're in the mood for a film that really goes full tilt on poetic cinematic language. Save it for a day where you feel like something that is beautifully depressing, because boy does this film deliver on that. Hey! So this is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Why is it not nominated? Three Identical Strangers is directed by Tim Wardle and tells the story of three identical triplets who find out through an interesting series of events that they were separated at birth and come to find each other again in their late teens. But that is not what this film is really about. I wouldn't dream of spoiling what the reveal halfway through this film is, but trust me, you will never be able to guess what it is. When you get to the point where they reveal why this documentary was really made, you are going to fall out of your chair. I personally broke down in tears and had to pause the film to take a breather because I could not believe what I was seeing. This shit really happened. And it's not just the subject matter that makes me think this film deserves recognition. The pacing and narrative structure of this is absolutely top-notch, and the amount of information they're able to get across in only an hour and 36 minutes is pretty impressive. It was especially impactful for someone like myself who wasn't even born yet when these events were all over the news and had no prior knowledge of them whatsoever. Needless to say, this is a must-watch if you love documentaries because Three Identical Strangers is really something special. Bo Burnham's 8th Grade is not only an impressive directorial debut, but one of the more relatable coming-of-age films I've seen in a while. It is especially surprising that it hasn't been nominated for anything considering the attention that Lady Bird got last year, another well-written coming-of-age film with a female lead that was also the directorial debut of Greta Gerwig. Though story and character-wise these films are very different, considering the parallels between the two, it's just weird that the Academy would praise one and ignore the other. Elsie Fisher's performance really made me feel like I was watching a real person, and I really look forward to seeing how her career progresses. In fact, all of the kids, regardless of their acting skill levels, just overall felt like real kids. I feel like we're finally getting past the days of people in their 30s being cast as high schoolers, and this film is a great example of why we just cannot go back to doing that. The writing, also by Bo Burnham, is really great and a far cry from the out-of-touch teenage dialogue we're often stuck with when watching films about young adults. 8th Grade was a much-needed breath of fresh air, and it sucks that the Academy hasn't acknowledged Bo Burnham's talent at all. This goes above and beyond what you would expect from someone's first full-length film, and I highly recommend it. Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria was by far my favorite film of 2018. It is not only one of the best remakes I have ever seen, but it is also one of my favorite films of all time now. And I want to just get this out of the way and say that of course this is just my opinion, so don't get angry and call the film school Giallo Club police on me. But it is better than the original. That of course is not to say that the original isn't good. That is not at all what I'm saying. I like the original, and I am well aware of its significance as a classic in its genre. But Jesus Christ, did Guadagnino take this not only to the next level, but 10 more levels after that. Remake isn't even the right word for what he did here. He literally took the names of some of the characters, the fact that they're witches, and the fact that they dance, and said thank you, that is all. And made a film that doesn't even resemble the original in the slightest aside from those specific things. So I totally get why he's calling it a reimagining rather than a remake. I knew that this film would probably be good because Guadagnino has already proven himself as a great director, but I had no idea that my soul was gonna leave my body when I finally got to see it. When I saw this, I was fortunate enough to be in a theater with a good audience where nobody was talking during it so I could experience it fully on a big screen with zero distractions. I don't think I've ever been reduced to tears during a movie purely because of how in awe I was of it before. I'm serious, during the big scene, I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but if you've seen it, you know exactly what scene I'm talking about. I legitimately teared up because I could not believe the balls on this beautiful Italian man. On top of its masterful writing and directing, this film ticks all of the boxes for me as far as something that if taken seriously could sweep the Oscars. The cinematography and editing are both stylish and unique, the production design is great, the costume design is great, makeup and visual effects are great. You get what I'm saying. I mean, Tilda Swinton plays 3 roles in this, and all of them are outstanding. What does she have to do for you people? And on top of it all, Tom York made the best musical score of the year, and nobody cares. Suspiria not being nominated for Best Song is just shameful. I want to cry. Now, I assume that since you're watching this video, you're likely the type of person who pays somewhat close attention to film reviews in general, and are probably aware that there were some people who did not like this film. In fact, at least when it came out, things were pretty split down the middle, and I do understand that this film is weird. I mean, like, it's so weird. I am not joking when I say that this film is in-your-face disturbing on a level that few people are used to, so proceed with extreme caution if you're the type of person that has a hard time with that kind of stuff. Suspiria goes hard and has no restraint when it comes to the specific type of violence it portrays. I also understand that some of the cinematography choices in this are not what one would expect from a 2018 film. There is a very specific type of slow motion used later on in the film that I personally really loved, and I felt was appropriate for the dreamlike quality they were going for in those moments. But it's the type of thing where I can kind of put my personal aesthetic preferences aside and understand that it might be distracting for someone else to the point where it might even look just plain ugly to them. So I completely understand that this film is not for everyone. But at the same time, this film has so much going for it that the level of dismissiveness I found in its more negative reviews really kind of annoyed me. A common thread being that the film's 2.5-hour runtime is too long. I haven't seen anyone talk about specifically why they feel the film is too long and which portions of the film they felt should be trimmed down, just a dismissive, overarching, too long. Okay, first of all, don't sit and binge watch an entire season of Game of Thrones and talk to me about too long. Do not have a Lord of the Rings Extended Edition marathon and talk to me about too long. Don't wait in line outside of the Apple Store for any length of time and then turn around and talk to me about too long. Okay, so obviously I'm kind of joking. Of course, there are plenty of films that run far longer than they should and need a little snip here and there, aka most Marvel movies that aren't Infinity War. But the way Suspiria is paced and divided up into acts makes its 2.5-hour runtime just fine with me. This film takes place at a dance academy where all of these women live together doing their day-to-day activities together, so I'm just fine with this film making me live with them for a while. I like that it takes its time because when this movie decides to kick it into high gear, it feels very earned, and like there was a sufficient amount of suspense and tension leading up to those moments. Again, I get someone being bored by this film, I guess, but at the same time, I'm like, but it's so good though, what's the matter with you? This movie got under my skin. This movie frightened me. This movie touched my butt without asking. And you know what? I didn't mind, because I'm kind of in love with it. And you know what? If you don't like this movie, then excuse my language, but I just have to say it. Take a hike, pal. I don't like you. Anyway, there's my Oscar snubs list, and I hope it helped you out if you're looking for something interesting to watch that you might have missed last year. As for me, from now until the Academy Awards airs, I will just be sitting here debating whether to not watch it in protest or to watch it to see exactly how much of a train wreck it turns out to be. Anyways, thank you for watching.